Hello everyone, today we're watching how primitive building videos are staged by Sunny V2. Before we start, I would just like to say one thing. Who believed this shit was actually real? It seemed pretty obvious to me that this stuff was fake. Like, there's no way... I don't believe there were people who actually thought that these videos were real, because there's no way these people build all this stuff by hand. I mean, I saw videos where they had fucking water slides, gigantic pools, stuff like that. Like, it was obviously fake. But apparently people believed it was real, so much to the point where Sunny V2 had to make a video on it where he exposes it. Like, damn. Well, let's watch it.
Almost every single primitive building channel is underpinned by countless different lies, and we've got tons of evidence to prove it. Now we need to put an emphasis on the fact that this is most primitive building channels, and certainly not all of them. After sifting through forum post upon forum post about the ways in which these...
there's one channel. I'm pretty sure... There's one channel who I know who actually was real. And I think it's this primitive technology one. I think that's what it's called. The reason why I know it was real is because it was pretty easy to tell it was actually real. Because the stuff he made didn't look very good.
Primitive builders lie in order to generate sometimes up to...
Yeah, like this. Come on. People thought this was real? Like, how? You think two people would have been able to build this by hand? I refuse to believe people thought this was real. You can't be that naive. There's no way.
To 500 million views per video, users continued to mention one name over and over, crediting him as legitimate amongst the sea of phonies. Primitive technology. The 10.
Yeah, this is the guy I was talking about.
4 million subscriber channel, which is run by an Australian named John Plant, basically invented the primitive construction genre, all the way down to the sound design of silence mixed with rainforest noises, with primitive technology even stating in a Reddit AMA that originally it was out of laziness in not putting narration in the videos, but then the silent format became popular, so I kept it that way. When going back to the beginning of these silent relaxing videos, it becomes pretty...
You see, with this you can tell it's real because it doesn't look good. It looks good, but you can tell the difference. With those other videos, it looks way too smooth, too polished, too nice. It obviously wasn't done by hand. With this, you can tell it's real.
Obvious as to why they're credited as seeming pretty legit in terms of authenticity. Primitive technology cuts no corners in showing how each stage of the construction is completed.
Oh yeah, that's another
For
point.
example, when examining his very first video, he shows the axe being sharpened, a log then being cut by the axe, then the logs being crafted together in a way that feels realistic. All of this is accompanied by specific captions explaining what's going on in that very moment, alongside a full description of the build, all the way down to how long the construction process took. His builds never include swimming pools or anything over the top, yet feel impressive as they seem to be on the cutting edge of what is and isn't possible to build by hand. The legitimacy of some of his more impressive builds, such as this brick hut, can be supported by YouTube comments such as this one, which stated, "I actually know John personally. He was a really good friend. We live in the same town, although I haven't seen him since he went viral. I have fond memories of him telling us that he was building huts out bush and had no idea they were so legit, before going on to credit him as a pretty authentic guy from a personal relationship standpoint." All of this is...
Sounds like a great comment, but it's a comment on YouTube. You can't just immediately believe it like, oh yeah, I'm this guy's friend. I mean, that one, it could be legit, but you have to take it with a grain of salt.
Incredibly important.
It could just be a random person on the internet.
Understand, as primitive technology's videos
doesn't
set a
actually know
baseline
this
for
guy.
what should and shouldn't be achievable in a natural setting. Additionally, primitive technology has been kind enough to provide us with a statement, which will be referred to as we look at the channels on the other end of the spectrum, also known as the fakers. The fundamental problem with the genre is that with so much time between camera cuts, there's plenty of time to set things up illegitimately. And with Primitive Technology's very first video receiving over 44,000 Reddit upvotes and 30 million views, it's no surprise that copycats with less...
I mean, look at this. Look at it. Like, they're not even trying to hide it's fake. You're not gonna... Who looks at this and just goes, yeah, this is definitely real and was built by two guys completely by hand and with no tools. Like, there's no way. There's no way someone believes that. It's obviously fake and built with machinery.
Integrity began to pop up left, right, and center. On these channels, the buildings were taller, the slides were...
Like, yeah. What is this? You telling me they built this by hand with that pool? Like, really?
Buildings were taller, the slides were longer, and the water was suspiciously more blue.
And it's a weird blue colour. Why is it so blue? Probably because they're probably...
Yeah, that's not natural water. That much is obvious.
Dying or something? There's no reason for it to look so blue like that.
Even more interestingly, almost all of these channels range from the exact same area, being Cambodia, Thailand, or Vietnam, yet often geotag the United States, claim to be living in the United States, and have their social blade country set to the United States. The overall production and build quality on these channels is arguably far more impressive than the OG primitive technology, to the point where you have to ask yourself, are they really creating these structures out of mud and sticks?
Do you really have to ask yourself that question though? You already know the answer. Why would you even ask the question?
Well, when you do a little bit of research, the answer to this question is most certainly no. The best evidence for this is found when looking at...
You don't even have to do research. You just use your brain. Common sense. It's obvious. Like, come on.
5 million subscriber channel called Primitive Technology Idea, whose failure to cover up the ways in which they fake their videos make them almost comical to watch. Take for example this episode titled Building Underground Water Maze Crocodile to the Secret Underground House and Swimming Pool, in which the first shot shows 2 men digging on the surface, then in the next frame they're in an 8-foot deep trench. Now, if they're digging this deep with sticks, how are they avoiding large rocks and potential tree roots from, you know, the massive line of...
Oh, and also, how is it so goddamn smooth? It's perfect. It goes down perfectly straight. Like, it's obvious this isn't dug by hand.
Trees seen just behind them. Are they being...
If you wanted to dig this by hand, like actually do it by hand with whatever sticks they're using, it would take you months. And I'm pretty sure those people released a video every like 1 or 2 months or something like that. So it was
assisted by
obviously
machinery.
staged.
Well, we'll get to that in a little bit, but first let's focus on the idea that it's only 2 people doing these impressively large primitive construction projects. If that's what they were attempting to portray, it probably would have been best not to include the clip where a guy in a white t-shirt can be seen working on the project in the background. Yet if it were just these 3 guys, that still wouldn't be that bad. However, further evidence suggests that they are far more help than this. At the start of the week, a community post was made on this channel in the hope that someone who had worked with one of these primitive builders would be willing to share their experience in doing so. We received countless emails which were all super helpful, yet one email stood out as being incredibly unique. That email was incredibly from one of the cameramen who works for one of these larger Southeast Asian primitive building channels. His name and the channel he works for have both been blurred out, as it'd be a little unfair for him to get in trouble for simply trying to help out, but the email began by stating, as you may have suspected, it's not as streamlined as the video would suggest. It is a large operation, as you may suspect, with a large team of us behind it. After we then offered to answer any questions we had about their channel, we attempted to figure out how many different people will work on the actual construction part of the project from start to finish, to which he would respond, it is depending on the scale of the project but no less than 1 dozen or more, before going on to explain that within his team, there is a director for the acting done. There is also a hired architect to obviously make sure the structure will not collapse and will last long enough to film in, and obviously afterwards many editors are involved. In case an email from someone who works from one of these primitive builders isn't enough evidence, it's time to introduce a different channel called Photo Expression, who incredibly stumbled upon one of these primitive construction sites before capturing over 8 minutes of footage with a drone. We'll refer to different parts of this footage throughout our video. So they just like
abandon it and leave it?
How many people are really working on these sites? There's initially a clip where 8 different workers can be seen standing around a rectangular hole in the jungle, followed by another grainier clip from a far distance where somewhere between 7 and 10 people can be seen building a swimming pool. If they were honest about how many people were working on each project, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it should be noted that some of these videos specifically state in the description that I've been working hard with my 2 friends about 100 days to completely build, when in reality it's a whole team working for only 3 to 10 days depending on the project, as mentioned in the email response from the cameraman. So if they're being untruthful about the time period as well as how many people are working...
Honestly, I would much rather watch a real video where they actually just say the truth about how they're doing this with machinery and a whole team, because this shit looks cool. It does. It looks great. But They're lying about it. So fuck them. If they were being truthful, these videos would still probably get the same amount of views, but people wouldn't hate them.
On each project, what else are they lying about? Well, how about the incredible fire pits that they seem to create effortlessly? Going back to the statement made to us by Primitive Technology, he seemed to imply that maybe the fire making in their videos was fake. It's hardly surprising that he brought this up, as when you compare his meticulous method of creating fire in the wild to the fire making of these Southeast Asian primitive channels, as mentioned previously, it becomes comical.
I love how his hand, like his left hand, is
it becomes comical.
It's right off camera. It's obvious he has a lighter and he just lit it on fire. Like, come on.
They slap a couple of rocks together before beginning an explosive fire on large logs with no kindling whatsoever. John went on to state that if they've faked simpler things, then they're most certainly faking more complicated ones, which turns out to be true, as when looking at another video by Primitive Technology Idea, it becomes obvious that not only are these guys faking simple things such as fire, these guys are also faking the most labor-intensive exercise of all, the digging process itself.
I mean, come on. If they're faking something as simple as a fire, it's obvious they're not actually digging all the stuff themselves. That would take months of work just to dig the damn hole.
This video with over 63 million views begins as most do. A shirtless guy draws a big circle and begins to dig it out. Only in the next frame, suddenly there's spray paint on the ground that they forgot to rub out. Additionally, on the wall of the hole, these long smooth cuts can be seen, which are completely incomparable to the cuts being made by the stick. Well, there's different. A reason for this. Turns out spray paint marks weren't the only thing that they forgot to rub out, as in the minutes that follow, excavated tracks can be seen here, 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 and here. In a different video by the same channel, the same person can be seen working very hard digging out a similar hole, which to their credit...
How do you go to this extreme of faking stuff, but forget such simple things? It would be so easy to hide that, but they don't care. Or they're just really stupid and blind.
Contains no excavator tracks around it. One mistake they did make, however, was that they forgot to take the actual excavator out of the top right hand corner. According to the email sent to us by the cameraman on one of these channels, approximately 70% of the digging is completed by machinery, whilst 30% is completed by hand, given how much of the work lies in simply digging. But men still do plenty of digging. As you may guess, in small underground spaces, it is impossible to fit a skid steer loader in the hole. Most of the actual construction is done by a hired team of specialized builders, from my understanding, and they work with only intrinsic tools. The dirt is removed by skid steer loaders and offloaded elsewhere, and skid steer loaders are used in the initial boring process, whilst incrementally we film the builders doing superficial works on the hole. The video in which the excavator can be seen in plain sight then goes on to strangely display the collection of concrete from a river, which is the exact same clip reused from the previous video. Now, why would they reuse the same clip twice in two different videos?
Because they're too lazy to make two different ones.
Concrete from a river is completely and utterly bogus. Concrete doesn't grow in a...
That's not river. That's not river. That's not concrete, that's just mud.
River, according to a civil engineer who had commented on one of these videos. Earth cement, this is incredibly fake. Cement requires a precise combination of different raw materials and then receives considerable heat treatment in order to make the powder we all know and love / hate. What's even funnier is that every single one of these channels has their own unique method for creating natural concrete. This channel's concrete is simply a mix of dirt and water, which, if you think about it for 2 seconds, doesn't...
That's just mud. It's just wet dirt.
Create concrete and rather creates muddy water or mud, which is just dirt after the water dries. This other channel gets a little bit more creative with it by taking a chunk out of a termite nest, grinding it down into powder, mixing it with water, then concreting an entire pool with this small chunk of termite nest. Yet neither of these compare to the fakest channel of them all, Primitive Technology Life, which decides to just skip the concrete altogether and go with good old rocks and dirt. However, that's not the only suspicious thing about this shot. You'll notice when looking at the bamboo that each branch has a suspiciously clean cut cut on the end. Compare this to Primitive Technology, the legitimate channel from Australia, who in one video displays what the end of a log should actually look like, and you'll notice pretty quickly that these pieces of bamboo weren't naturally cut on site. These pieces of bamboo weren't either, which, as displayed in the video, were attached together then used to siphon water from a river to the pool, only there was no river. Photo Expression found the exact site of this pool, then stated in his video that in reality, the closest water source was more than 6 kilometers away. Instead, he found a bunch of blue plastic piping attached to a tap in the ground. Going back to the email from the cameraman, the water for their channel just comes in cubic containers that is transported there. A very funny part is any scene where you see them sourcing water from some magnificent waterfall or lake, they're actually going somewhere perhaps hundreds of kilometers away and pretending to take it back. The video in which Photo Expression had stumbled upon various completed primitive builds also showed that after these channels are finished building, the sites are simply left to rot. This video doesn't speak for every Southeast Asian primitive building channel, but in this particular case, rubbish was left everywhere, including, as you might guess, cement bags. The fact that the videos are fake isn't the most concerning, it's the destruction of the land that's concerning. Now, if this was public rainforest, you could probably consider this a pretty big deal, but according to the cameraman's email, at least on their channel, every build is done on privately owned land, which is leased for the purposes of the video. If this
you probably wouldn't be allowed, you definitely wouldn't be allowed to do this in like a public space. Pretty sure that's some sort of violation. Well, I'm not sure. This is in Asia, Southeast Asia. I don't know what the laws are like there, but it would probably be some sort of violation. But if it's private, you can do what you want.
Expression is in the wrong for snooping around and filming on someone else's property. We're kidding, of course, but if the builds are being completed on privately owned land, it's a little narcissistic to comment on what they should and shouldn't do with it. Primitive Technology, the original legitimate Australian channel, put it best in his email to us when he said, "My advice to people who really want to know if the techniques on display are legitimate is to put them into practice and see. If you can follow the steps and get a similar result, then it's probably legit." He added that these corner-cutting channels are motivated by money and status alone, rather than a true interest in primitive technology. But wanting to stay out of internet drama, we'll leave it up to the discerning viewer to decide what's real and what's not.
I mean, you don't get to decide what's real or not. It's either real or it isn't. And there's a lot of evidence which shows that it's not real. You don't get to decide it is real just because you want it to be. It's fake. That's pure and simple fact. You can't deny factual evidence just because you don't want it to be the case. I mean, I don't know. The videos always seemed fake to me. Whenever I watched one, I immediately just thought, there's no way they actually built this by hand. And I'm pretty sure most people who watched those videos were thinking the same thing, because there's no way you could possibly believe that this is real. And anyway, like and subscribe, comment, all that usual stuff. I'll see you in the next video.